So much news coming out about what's happening in Congress. Democrats unveiling $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. We're told the bipartisan infrastructure bill is going to go through its final stages as all this is happening. Joan McCarter joins me, Daily Kos senior political writer who covers it all, writing from her home in Idaho. Hi, Joan. I hope everything is well there.
Everything's fine here. Thanks for asking.
Okay, we just have to ask.
Everything's actually overwhelming, but
Right. So you focused in on the $3.5 trillion American Jobs and Families Plan. It covers the human infrastructure, the rest of the infrastructure, the most important parts that the Biden administration wants to make sure we invest in. And for families, it creates investments in early child care, community college tuition, paid family leave is established, sick leave, immigrant families as well. In addition, Democrats really want to make sure that we put undocumented immigrants on a path to citizenship. Tell us more about what's in it.
that's one of the key parts that is it's going to be a big test for all of the Democrats and for Chuck Schumer in particular, the path to citizenship, particularly for Dreamers and for essential workers who are undocumented in here, because it's going to set up a fight potentially with the Senate parliamentarian. We can get to that in a little bit. There's a lot in this bill that continues from the American Rescue Plan, from the COVID relief plan, including making quasi-permanent, we're not sure exactly how long they're going to be able to do it, the monthly payments of the child tax credit to families, as well as some expansions of the Affordable Care Act, making it actually more affordable for more people. So those are key things that they promised they would put in, and it looks like they're going to. One of the big ones on climate that didn't get addressed in the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is pretty much inadequate on climate, is the Climate Conservation Corps, sort of a reboot of FDR's Civilian Conservation Corps, which will be doing a lot of the environmental work that's necessary for remediation in, taking care of backlog in national parks, helping with all of the coastal reconstruction that they want to do with this bill. So there's some that's going to be specifically climate, which is good. They're going to include the part of the American Jobs Bill, the infrastructure bill, that Republicans refuse to have. And that is the expansion of home and community-based healthcare help for folks who are disabled and for seniors. Another top line one, I'm trying to remember all of the things. There's really pretty good stuff in this.
Yeah,
Flew out of my head.
I would say it fills in the holes that are in the actual infrastructure bill, but it's kind of the other way around. I mean, it's not like it fills in the holes. It's the infrastructure bill is nothing compared to this. I mean,
right.
Right.
And what's frustrating, particularly on the climate front, is how little there is in the infrastructure bill, and the stuff that they couldn't overlap on, that they decided that they couldn't take, that was being left out of the infrastructure bill to put into this one, like the fact that the lead pipe cleanup has been reduced by about a quarter. Instead of being able to replace every lead pipe in the country, now they're going to be able to do 1 in 4. Stuff like that should have been addressed in this infrastructure, the hard infrastructure bill. That's not going to get done here, but maybe they can find ways to pick it up. Maybe they can stretch the Climate Conservation Corps to do some of these kinds of things.
Now, talk about the infrastructure bipartisan infrastructure bill. And like so far, the way that the White House had envisioned this, it's going. Democrats unveiled the reconciliation bill, and people are happy with what's in it. And
Hmm.
people weren't going to, sign on to the infrastructure bill unless that was solid and moving along. And these two have to kind of move in tandem, and they seem to be. Although, tell me what's happening with the infrastructure bill. And we're even seeing some Republicans getting heat from some Republican pundits or conservative pundits for supporting it. What's going
And
on?
from a certain former occupant of the White House.
Yes.
Um, on his behalf, Senator Bill Haggerty from Tennessee, who had been a Trump ambassador, spent the weekend pretty much saying no, 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 and delaying process in the whole thing. So that ended up with them having a vote scheduled for 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. But they've decided that they can wait another 7 hours and do it at 10 o'clock instead. But that's largely because, on behalf of Trump, apparently he was talking to him on the phone all weekend. Haggerty decided he had to stretch this out as long as he could.
Because one
That's given
senator
more
can one
time.
right, one senator can stop the process.
Yes, by refusing to give unanimous consent, and that's what he did. So, um, that gives time, of course, for more lobbying from the right wing, more pressure from Trump, and we've already seen a couple of senators who were supportive, supposedly, were part of that gang of 22 or gang of 20 or however many they ended up having, that were negotiating the bill, or at least had signed on to say they would support it. Two of them are not. Dan Sullivan of Alaska and Jerry Moran of Kansas have said, oh, no, we're not going to do it. So we'll see in the next 12 hours, 18 hours, how many decide they're really going to stick with this. I think it will pass. I think it'll still get the 10 votes. I don't know that it's going to get the 16 or 17 that had said they would be supporting it.
Right. Which is still, even if it gets the 10, that's 10 more than I thought at the beginning of this process. but
More than I thought, yeah.
but even if it passes and then the reconciliation bill does what they're saying it's going to do, and it passes, and there's still so many moving parts, and
Yes.
there's the house and lots of other things. But even if all this happens, Alex Perrine had a really good piece in the New York Times about how completely and totally dysfunctional all this is, that just to show something or prove something, we spent all this time
Yeah.
getting some Republicans to support a bipartisan bill, and then we'll pass the rest of everything in reconciliation, when everything could have been done in reconciliation,
Right. And
months
it's
ago,
on the
and we
one
could have been
thing
talking about other
on
things. Yeah.
infrastructure, on the one thing that Republicans have always loved, that there's always been bipartisan agreement on, that's always been easy to pass: infrastructure, spending money in people's districts and states. I mean, it's never been this kind of fight, except with Trump, but that was Trump.
Right, right.
It's insane, and it does show how broken everything is, and what the filibuster is doing to the Senate. Because it
Yeah.
should not have been this hard. It should not have gone to these lengths in getting done.
And to spend this amount of time on it and not on other issues, and in particular voting rights,
Right.
which should have been the laser focused issue, at least for a while. You talk about how Democrats are now exploring options to bring voting rights to the floor before leaving for the remainder of the summer. And a group of senators, including Chuck Schumer and Raphael Warnock and Joe Manchin, have been working on a narrower bill.
A narrow bill. It's still not a bad bill. It would be better than nothing passing. And one thing I have to say for Manchin, I don't often give him a lot of credit. He is saying that we can't have partisan gerrymandering. So that's important. As the states start now, as of next week, they get the census data to start redrawing congressional districts. And we know how scary that is when it's Republican states in control.
Right.
To his credit, Manchin wants to see nonpartisan redistricting, and that would be probably part of this bill. But until he agrees and gets Senator Sinema to agree to get rid of the filibuster, it's not going to work. I'm glad that he's doing this, but I think that it is.
Right.
I think
Well,
it's
that's
going to be a show
y-
vote primarily.
right. I mean, that's I guess the question a lot of us have. So he's putting this through, and he's saying and really believing that he's going to get the 10 Republicans, and she does too, right? When they don't materialize, is that going to be the thing that finally makes him say, is he looking for all the cover he can possibly get, and that even his most favorite bill that he crafted failed, so he'll finally do it? Or you don't think that's going to happen?
My guess is that's Schumer's bet. I don't know that that's how it's going to work with Manchin.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what Schumer's working at or trying to come toward. And I think probably as well, this interminable debate time, negotiation time on infrastructure was part of that as well. Playing this out, giving Manchin and Sinema enough string that they could try this to say, okay, we did this for you. Now you got to do this for us. I don't know that it will work, but I think that's what Schumer was trying.
Right.
Possibly.
And
I can't I can't presume to
is it
know
at
what
least
in the world is
is it at
going
least
on with the
worth a
Senate.
shot because we don't have any
Yeah,
other choice?
yeah. I don't know how else you get it through their heads that Republicans are not going to be nice and not going to work with them. And I think what we're seeing here on the infrastructure bill is just enough Republican senators being allowed to vote for the thing so that some of the vulnerable senators, there is more Republican seats to defend in 2022 than there are Democratic seats. So that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
They can take this back to their states, say, look what we did. We worked with Democrats on this. But to their base, we're not going to let anything else pass. This was for you. This was for the American people. This was for my constituents. But we have to stop their socialist ways and letting anything else happen. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what they're counting on. Um, I think they're also probably reeling a little bit from the fact that COVID's back, and it's largely because of Republicans that COVID is back. All of those people who are
Right.
refusing to mask up, refusing to vaccinate,
And those
that
terrible
might be
governors.
reflecting poorly on Senate Republicans. And I think they might be having a little bit of panic over that.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back to the parliamentarian because you raised it and you said maybe, and we'll talk about it later, and including immigration reform in the reconciliation package, because you just keep, that's all you keep seeing in the media is if the parliamentarian okays it, if the parliamentarian okays it. And you're really good about constantly underscoring the parliamentarian works for the Senate. So talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
This is the Senate is just so stupid in so many ways. If we can get all of this accomplished with the Senate and get them to ignore the parliamentarian, I think the next thing we need to work on is just abolishing the Senate. Um, because of their arcane rules, they have set up this budget reconciliation that can pass with just Democratic votes, but it has to be under pretty supposedly strict constructs, one of which is that it has to demonstrably change either the revenue or the the deficit side. So taxing spending are the only things really it can affect. And the parliamentarian can sort of be arbitrary on that sometimes, it seems. So like in 2017 when she was allowing the repeal of a zero mandate tax in the Affordable Care Act to be declared be included in reconciliation. That didn't affect revenue because it had already been zeroed out, but still. So the parliamentarian kind of plays fast and loose sometimes, it seems like, with the rules. But the parliamentarian is also just an employee. She is staff. And the Senate can decide whether or not to agree with her rulings. It only takes a majority vote. So 51 in this case. It would include Kamala Harris. But they have to say that they're going to do it. They have to agree to doing it. And in this case, on immigration, they've got to do it. There's no other way we are going to see a path to citizenship for Dreamers and for essential workers who are undocumented immigrants.
And the whole thing is just so arbitrary anyway. It's like we have this thing called budget reconciliation, which is really just an exception for the filibuster, which we're all against. We're against getting rid of, but we're okay with using for this. But then we leave it to this one person to decide what's in it.
Yeah, none of it makes sense. The Senate never makes sense, and I don't know why I decided to put myself on a path of having to deal with them every day.
We just have a minute, but we've talked a lot about Postmaster General Louis DeJoy and his leadership last year. He's still presiding over the post office. I think people are forgetting that.
And his plan, as far as we know, to make everything more expensive and slower at the post office is going to go through. For some unknown reason, Ron Bloom, who is the Democratic chair of the Board of Governors, the chair because Biden is now president, so the Democrats get to chair it and have the majority. But he was appointed by Trump, and for some reason, he is a real DeJoy booster. And I don't understand what's going on there. But that, I think, is the main problem with DeJoy still being in that job and his plan to wreck the post office still moving forward.
And we still have elections coming up that he could affect as well.
Exactly.
So, really great to check in with you as always and have a great conversation with you as always. So thank you for coming on today.
I will be happy to do it again if we can figure out what the Senate's up to.
Yes. Or not.
Or not.
But bring some sense to it. Joan, always great to speak with you. Joan McCarter, Daily Kos senior political writer. Follow her at Joan McCarter on Twitter. We're back in a couple of minutes.
This is the Michelangelo Signorile Show.